The Galactic Coalition had existed for 12,000 years. It was the greatest empire the universe had ever seen. More than 300 star systems were united under one flag. 47 different alien species lived together in peace. They traded with each other. They shared knowledge. They built cities that floated among the stars and ships that could cross galaxies in days. They were one of the oldest races in the coalition. They had skin made of crystal that sparkled like diamonds in the light. They had 4 silver eyes that could see things no other species could see. Their ships were beautiful, made of living crystal that grew and healed itself. Admiral Iran was one of their greatest leaders. He had served the coalition for 200 years and had never lost a battle. They were warriors. Their bodies were covered in living armor that was part of their skin. They were strong and fierce, but they had learned to use their strength for protection instead of conquest. They were mysterious beings who could bend light itself. They could become invisible or create illusions that seemed completely real. There were dozens of other species too, each one unique, each one contributing something special to the coalition. For 12,000 years they had faced many challenges: pirates, natural disasters, plagues that spread across worlds. But they had always survived. They had always grown stronger. Many believed the coalition would last forever. They were wrong. No one knew where the Dominion came from. They simply appeared one day at the edge of coalition space. Their ships were black as the void between stars. They absorbed all light and gave nothing back. They were angular and sharp, like weapons given form. And they came in numbers that made even the bravest admirals feel fear. The first contact was a disaster. The coalition sent diplomatic ships to greet the newcomers. They sent messages of peace and friendship. They offered trade and alliance. The Dominion did not respond. They did not communicate at all. They simply destroyed the diplomatic ships and kept moving forward. Admiral Iran was given command of the defense fleet. He gathered 5,000 ships from every corner of the coalition: crystal cruisers, war vessels, shadow ships, and many more. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in coalition history. Iran believed it would be enough. The first major battle took place in the Verdant system. It was home to 3 garden worlds, planets covered in forests and oceans and billions of lives. The Dominion came with 10,000 ships. They moved in perfect formation like a single organism with countless bodies. They did not negotiate. They did not demand surrender. They simply attacked. The battle lasted 3 days. Iran used every tactic he knew. He tried flanking maneuvers and ambushes. He tried concentrated fire and dispersed attacks. Nothing worked. The Dominion ships were faster, stronger, and their weapons cut through coalition shields like they were made of paper. By the end of the 3rd day, Iran had lost 3,000 ships. The Dominion had lost perhaps 200. The Verdant system fell. 3 garden worlds were reduced to ash. 18 billion lives ended in fire and silence. Over the next 6 months, the pattern repeated across the coalition. System after system fell to the black ships. They was destroyed despite their warriors fighting to the last breath. They tried to hide their worlds with their light-bending technology, but the Dominion found them anyway. The great library of Prime, which contained the knowledge of 1,000 civilizations, was burned to nothing. Iran fought in battle after battle. He watched his fleet shrink from 5,000 ships to 3,000, then to 1,000, then to fewer than 500. Good officers died around him. Friends he had known for centuries were gone in flashes of light. And still the Dominion came, endless and unstoppable. The coalition leaders met on Sanctuary Prime, the capital world. They argued about what to do. Some wanted to surrender, hoping the Dominion might show mercy. Others wanted to keep fighting, believing that somehow they could find a weakness. A few suggested running, abandoning the core worlds and fleeing to the far edges of the galaxy. In the end, it did not matter what they decided. The Dominion did not give them time. The final battle began without warning. Iran was on his flagship, the Eternal Light, when the Dominion fleet appeared around Sanctuary Prime. There were more than 15,000 enemy vessels. The coalition had gathered everything they had left, but it was only 3,000 ships. The battle was not a battle, it was a slaughter. Oran stood on his bridge and watched his people die. The tactical display was a mess of red lights as ship after ship was destroyed. The admiral gave orders that he knew would not matter. He tried to organize a defense that could not succeed. Around him, his crew worked with desperate efficiency, but there was nothing they could do against such overwhelming force. After 4 hours, fewer than 50 coalition ships remained. Sanctuary Prime was burning below them. The great cities that had stood for were rubble. The centers of government, art, and science were gone. 12,000 years of civilization was ending, and Iran could do nothing but watch. His communications officer, a young named Sira, looked at him with fear in her silver eyes. She was only 30 years old, barely an adult by their standards. She should have had centuries of life ahead of her. Oran made his decision. It felt like surrender, and perhaps it was, but someone had to survive. Someone had to remember what the coalition had been. He gave the order to retreat. The surviving ships scattered in every direction, each one running for the uncharted regions of space where perhaps the Dominion would not follow. Oran set a course for a distant arm of the galaxy that coalition ships had never explored. It was a region of space that their surveys had marked as empty and uninteresting. As the eternal light fled into the darkness, Oran looked back at Sanctuary Prime one last time. The planet was covered in fire now. Soon it would be just another dead rock orbiting a star that no longer had anyone to appreciate its light. The Galactic Coalition was dead. 12,000 years of history, art, science, and progress had been wiped out in 18 months. 47 species were now scattered refugees, running for their lives from an enemy they could not understand and could not defeat. Oran closed his 4 silver eyes and allowed himself to feel despair. He was old, tired, and broken. He had failed his people in the most complete way possible. He did not know what would come next, but he was certain of one thing: there was no hope left in the galaxy. He did not know about the small blue planet in that distant arm of space. He did not know about the young species that lived there, a species that had only recently learned to travel among the stars. He did not know that these beings had a very different view of impossible odds. But he would learn. The human ship Wanderer had been traveling through deep space for almost 2 years. It was not a warship. It was built for exploration, designed to find new worlds where humans might one day live. The ship carried 42 crew members who had volunteered to spend years away from Earth, mapping unknown regions of the galaxy. Captain Laura sat in her chair on the bridge, reading reports on her tablet. She was 53 years old with dark hair that had started turning gray at the temples. She had been a space captain for 30 years and had seen many strange things in her career. She thought nothing could surprise her anymore. She was about to be proven wrong. Daniel, the navigation officer, was the first to notice something unusual. He was a young man from Texas, only 32 years old, with dark eyes and a quick smile. He had joined the Wanderer because he wanted to see things no human had ever seen before. Today, he would get his wish. He studied his console with a frown, then called out to the captain. He told her that they were picking up some kind of signal. It was repeating in a mathematical pattern, definitely artificial, but it was not like anything in their databases. Put down her tablet and walked over to his station. She looked at the readings and felt her heart beat a little faster. After centuries of searching, humanity had found countless planets but never any sign of intelligent life. Could this finally be different? Grace, the science officer, joined them. She was a thin woman with short red hair and a habit of speaking in quick, efficient sentences. She analyzed the signal and confirmed that it was not natural. Someone or something had created it. Ordered the ship to investigate. They found a debris field spread across thousands of kilometers of space. The wreckage was made of materials that human science could not explain, metals that should not exist, alloys that the laws of physics as humans understood them. This was not human wreckage. In the middle of the debris they found a small vessel. It was damaged and dark, drifting without power. Scans showed that something was alive inside. Made a decision that would change human history. She ordered a rescue team to bring the survivor aboard. The being they found was unlike anything humans had ever seen. It had 4 silver eyes set in a face made of crystal. Its skin sparkled and caught the light in 1,000 tiny reflections. It was unconscious and badly injured, but it was alive. The medical team worked for days to keep the creature alive. They did not know its biology, so they had to learn as they worked. Dr. Cole led the effort. He was a quiet man in his 40s who had spent his career treating humans. Now he was trying to save a life form that should not have existed according to everything humans knew about the universe. Slowly, the alien recovered. It woke up confused and afraid, surrounded by strange creatures it had never seen before. The crew did their best to show that they meant no harm. They brought food and water, though they had no idea what the alien could eat. They tried to communicate through gestures and simple sounds. The alien's name was Oran, though the humans would not learn this for weeks. He had been drifting in his damaged ship for 3 months after his flagship was destroyed in a Dominion ambush. He had expected to die alone in the cold darkness between stars. Instead, he woke up in a warm medical bay, surrounded by soft-skinned bipeds who seemed genuinely worried about his health. It took 2 weeks to establish real communication. The Wanderer's computer specialists worked with Grace to build a translation program. They started with mathematics since numbers are universal. Then they moved to simple concepts like hot and cold, light and dark, yes and no. Slowly, a bridge was built between 2 species that had never known each other existed. When Oran was finally able to speak with Captain, he told her everything. He spoke of the Galactic Coalition and its 12,000 years of history. He described the dozens of species that had lived together in peace. He talked about the great achievements they had made, the worlds they had built, the knowledge they had gathered. Then he told her about the Dominion. Listened without interrupting as Oran described the black ships that came from nowhere. She heard about battle after battle lost, system after system destroyed. She learned that billions of lives had been extinguished and that entire species had been wiped out. The coalition, which had seemed so powerful and permanent, had been crushed in less than 2 years. When Oran finished his story, his 4 silver eyes were dim with grief. He looked at and spoke words that the translation program rendered in a flat, mechanical voice. He said that she could not help. He said that her people were too young, too primitive. He said that the Dominion had destroyed civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. Humans had only been traveling among the stars for a century. What could they possibly do against such an enemy? Was quiet for a long moment. She thought about Earth and the 8 billion people who lived there. She thought about the colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. She thought about all the hopes and dreams of a species that had only recently reached for the stars. Then she asked a simple question: how long until the Dominion reached Earth? Oran calculated in his mind. He said that at their current rate of expansion, it could be 50 years, perhaps less. Nodded slowly. Then she did something that confused the alien admiral completely. She smiled. She said that they had time to prepare. Oran stared at her with all 4 of his eyes. He did not understand how she could smile at such news. He had just told her that an unstoppable force of destruction was coming for her people, and she was talking about preparation. Did she not understand what the Dominion was? Explained that humans were different from the coalition species. She said that humans had spent their entire history fighting each other. They had wars that lasted decades and weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. They had survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that should have killed them all, and every time they had come back stronger. She told Iran that humans did not accept impossible situations. When faced with certain death, they did not give up. They fought harder. They found ways to win that no one had ever thought of before. It was not always pretty and it was not always noble, but it was effective. Iran looked at this strange creature with her soft skin and single pair of eyes. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to think that somewhere in this vast universe, there was a species that could stand against the Dominion. But he had seen too much death to believe in hope anymore. Seemed to understand his doubt. She put a hand on his crystalline arm, a gesture of comfort that crossed the vast distance between their species. She said that he should rest and heal. She said that when they reached Earth, he would see what humans could do when they had something to fight for. The wanderer turned toward home, carrying within it the news that would change everything. Humanity was not alone in the universe, and something terrible was coming. 3 years had passed since the wanderer returned to Earth with its impossible news. In that time, everything had changed. When the world first learned that aliens existed, there was chaos. Some people celebrated, believing this was the greatest discovery in human history. Others panicked, convinced that the end of the world had arrived. Governments struggled to maintain order as the truth spread across every news channel and social media platform on the planet. Then came the second part of the news. The Dominion was coming. An enemy that had destroyed a civilization of 47 species and 300 star systems was slowly making its way toward Earth. Suddenly, the petty conflicts between nations seemed very small indeed. It took 6 months for humanity to unite. 6 months of arguments, negotiations, threats, and compromises. But in the end, the United Earth Defense Initiative was born. Every nation on the planet contributed what it could. Money, resources, scientists, soldiers. For the first time in human history, the entire species was working toward a single goal. Commander Samuel Drake stood in the orbital shipyard above Mars, watching through a window as workers assembled the frame of a new warship. He was 41 years old, a career military officer who had served in 3 different conflicts before being promoted to the Defense Initiative. He had a strong jaw and eyes that had seen too much violence to ever look innocent again. Beside him stood Iran. The alien admiral had recovered fully from his injuries and had become an advisor to the human military. He found it strange that these young creatures treated him with such respect. His people had lost the war. What wisdom could he possibly offer? But the humans wanted to learn everything he knew. They asked about coalition technology, Dominion tactics, and the battles he had fought. They listened carefully and took detailed notes. And then they did something that surprised Iran. They started improving on what he taught them. Human scientists took coalition technology and combined it with their own inventions. They created weapons that even they had never imagined. Shields that could absorb Dominion energy beams. Engines that could make ships invisible to enemy sensors. Missiles that could think for themselves and find weaknesses in enemy armor. The ship taking shape outside the window was called the Resolve. It was the first of a new class of warship, designed from the ground up to fight the Dominion. It was not beautiful like coalition vessels. It was brutal and angular, every line designed for a single purpose: destruction. Drake explained the plan to Iran. The coalition had fought the Dominion with traditional tactics, trying to hold territory and protect populations. This had failed. Humans would do something different. He talked about guerrilla warfare, a concept that Iran did not understand at first. Drake explained that it meant attacking without warning, striking weak points, and disappearing before the enemy could respond. It meant never fighting fair, never standing still, never giving the Dominion a target they could destroy. Iran pointed out that the Dominion had overwhelming numbers. How could hit-and-run tactics defeat an enemy with 10,000 ships? Drake smiled, and there was something cold in his expression. He said that humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They had developed countless ways to kill, deceive, and outmaneuver opponents. They were very, very good at war. It was not something to be proud of, but it might be what saved them. Across the solar system, preparations were. On Earth, factories that had once made cars and electronics were now producing weapons and ship components. Universities were training a new generation of officers and engineers. Children in schools learned about the alien species of the coalition and the threat that was coming. More refugees arrived as human ships pushed deeper into space. They found warriors drifting in damaged vessels, hiding in asteroid fields, and members of species whose names humans struggled to pronounce. Each one brought more knowledge, more technology, and more determination to fight back against the enemy that had taken everything from them. Lieutenant Commander was put in charge of integrating these refugees into the human military. She was a small woman with sharp features and a mind that could analyze complex problems in seconds. She had to figure out how beings with completely different bodies, senses, and ways of thinking could work alongside human soldiers. It was not easy. They were nearly twice the size of humans and had difficulty fitting into ships designed for smaller bodies. They were so different that humans often could not tell where one ended and another began. Communication was a constant challenge, even with translation devices. But was patient and creative. She designed new systems that could be operated by tentacles, claws, or crystalline fingers. She created training programs that accounted for different species' strengths and weaknesses. Slowly, a truly alien military force began to take shape. On a space station orbiting Jupiter, human and coalition scientists worked together on the most secret project of all. They were studying a captured Dominion probe, trying to understand how the enemy thought and communicated. Doctor led the research team. She was 60 years old, a physicist who had spent her career studying theoretical problems that had no practical application. Now, she was trying to find a weakness in an enemy that had never shown one. After months of work, she discovered something interesting. The Dominion ships were linked together in a vast network. They shared information and coordinated their movements through this connection. It was what made them so effective in battle, allowing thousands of ships to act as one. But networks could be disrupted. Began working on a way to break the Dominion's communication system. If successful, it would turn their greatest strength into a weakness. Back on Mars, the resolve was completed. Drake watched as it left the shipyard for its first test flight. Behind it, 20 more ships were in various stages of construction. By the end of the year, there would be 100. In 5 years, there would be 500. It might not be enough. The Dominion had destroyed a civilization with thousands of years of advancement. Humans had barely left their own planet a century ago. But Drake remembered something that Captain had said when she first brought Iran to Earth. She had said that humans did not believe in impossible odds. They just found ways to beat them. Iran stood beside Drake and watched the resolve disappear into the blackness of space. He thought about his own people and the battles they had lost. He thought about the friends who had died and the worlds that had burned. For the first time since Sanctuary Prime fell, he felt something other than despair. He was not sure if humans could actually defeat the Dominion. But watching them prepare, watching them refuse to accept defeat before the war had even begun, he began to believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe was not as hopeless as he had thought. The storm was coming, but humanity was preparing to meet it. The Dominion advance fleet entered the system without any caution. Why would they be careful? They had destroyed hundreds of systems before this one. Their scouts had detected primitive radio signals from this region centuries ago, but the species here had not even achieved space travel at that time. They were nothing to worry about. 200 black ships moved through the darkness, heading toward the inner planets where sensors had detected signs of life. The fleet commander, if such beings had commanders, expected this to be another easy conquest. Another world to burn, another species to extinguish. They were wrong. Captain Maria Santos sat in her command chair on the bridge of the Defiant. She was 38 years old, born in Portugal but raised on a fishing boat that traveled the Atlantic Ocean. She had joined the Space Navy because she loved the idea of exploring new horizons. Now she was about to become the first human to lead a fleet into battle against an alien enemy. Around her ship, hidden in the shadow of a gas giant's largest moon, 27 other human vessels waited in silence. They had been there for 3 days, running on minimal power, invisible to every sensor the Dominion possessed. Human engineers had spent 2 years developing this stealth technology, and dozens of pilots had died testing early versions that did not work, but the final product was perfect. The Dominion had no idea they were there. Lieutenant Barnes, the tactical officer, reported that the enemy fleet had entered the engagement zone. He was a tall man from Chicago with steady hands and a voice that never shook no matter how dangerous the situation. He had been chosen for this mission because he could stay calm when everything around him was chaos. Santos took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine whether humanity had a chance or not. If their plan failed here, the Dominion would know what to expect. They would adapt. The element of surprise would be lost forever. She gave the order to begin. 28 human ships burst from hiding at the same moment, but they did not attack the main Dominion fleet. Instead, they raced toward the enemy's rear, targeting supply vessels and communication relays. The Dominion had never needed to protect these ships before. No enemy had ever gotten close enough to threaten them. In 12 minutes, the forward Dominion fleet was blind and cut off. They could not communicate with each other. They could not receive orders from their command ships. For the first time in their long history of conquest, they were confused. Then the second phase began. From the asteroid belt, hidden among rocks and ice that had drifted for billions of years, 300 weapons platforms activated. Each one had been positioned over months by small human ships that came and went without being detected. Each one had been powered down and invisible until this exact moment. They opened fire. Human weapons technology had advanced dramatically in 3 years. Nuclear-powered lasers that could cut through any armor. Antimatter torpedoes that erased matter from existence. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds, hitting with the force of small asteroids. All of these weapons struck the Dominion fleet from every direction at once. The black ships tried to respond. They were still the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Their weapons could destroy a human vessel with a single shot. Their armor could withstand almost anything, but they could not fight what they could not see. Human ships appeared, fired, and vanished again into stealth. The automated platforms kept shooting from locations the Dominion could not predict. There was no formation to target, no center to destroy, no pattern to analyze. The Dominion had conquered 100 species using superior technology and overwhelming force. They had no experience fighting an enemy that refused to stand and fight. Captain Santos watched the battle from the Defiant's bridge. Her ship darted through the chaos, appearing just long enough to fire a spread of missiles before disappearing again. Her crew worked with perfect efficiency, every person knowing exactly what to do and when to do it. They had trained for this moment for 2 years. They were ready. Commander Taylor led a squadron of smaller attack ships. He was 29 years old, the youngest squadron commander in the fleet, chosen because of his creative thinking and fast reflexes. His job was to find damaged Dominion ships and finish them off before they could recover. He spotted a black vessel that had lost its main engines to a kinetic strike. It was drifting, still firing its weapons randomly, but unable to maneuver. Taylor ordered his squadron to attack. 6 human ships swooped in from different angles, their weapons hitting the weak points where Dominion armor had already been damaged. The black ship exploded in a flash of light that was quickly swallowed by the void. On another part of the battlefield, Lieutenant Amy commanded a support vessel that was rescuing pilots from destroyed human ships. She was a medic, not a warrior, but in this battle everyone had a role to play. Her ship had no weapons, only powerful shields and medical equipment. Every time a human ship was destroyed, she raced to find the escape pods before the Dominion could. She had already saved 47 people. She would save many more before the battle ended. 2 hours after the fighting began, the Dominion fleet broke. The survivors, fewer than 60 ships out of the original 200, fled toward the edge of the system. They had never retreated before. They had never needed to. Captain Santos ordered her fleet to let them go. Humanity had made their point. The Dominion now knew that they were facing something new, something dangerous, something that would not be easy to destroy. The human losses were 11 ships, 312 people dead. It was a tragedy, but it was also a victory beyond anything they had hoped for. Santos composed a message to Earth Command. She reported that the system was secure. She reported that human tactics had worked even better than expected. She reported that the Dominion was now aware of humanity's existence. Far away, in the vast darkness between stars, the main Dominion fleet received signals from their retreating scouts. The machines or creatures or whatever they were processed this new information. They had encountered something unexpected. A species that did not fight like the others. A species that used deception and speed instead of strength and numbers. They did not feel fear if they felt anything at all, but they recognized a threat when they saw one. The full weight of the Dominion, every ship they had remaining after years of conquest, turned toward this new enemy. The first battle was over. Humanity had won. But the war was just beginning. 10 years had passed since humans first learned they were not alone in the universe. Admiral Samuel Drake stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, the largest warship humanity had ever built. It was over 2 kilometers long, carrying 3,000 crew members. Behind it stretched a fleet of more than 500 ships, each one built for the single purpose of defending Earth. The final battle had begun 6 hours ago. The Dominion had come with everything they had left, over 12,000 vessels in a single massive fleet. After a decade of warfare across 100 star systems, they had decided to end this conflict once and for all. They would destroy Earth and crush this stubborn species that refused to accept defeat. Drake had gray in his hair now and lines on his face that had not been there 10 years ago. He had fought in dozens of battles since the war began. He had watched friends die and celebrated impossible victories. He had seen humanity grow from a frightened species facing extinction into a force that made the Dominion hesitate. But this was the moment everything depended on. If they lost here, there would be nothing left to protect. Commander stood beside him, watching the tactical display that showed thousands of ships moving in complex patterns. She was 50 years old now, her black hair completely white from stress and age. She had been there from the beginning, helping to build the alliance between humans and coalition refugees that had made their survival possible. She reported that the Dominion fleet was breaking apart. Their coordination was failing. The ships were still firing, still fighting, but they were no longer moving as one. Drake allowed himself a small smile. The network disruption had worked. For years, Doctor and her team had been working on a way to break the Dominion's communication system. They had studied captured probes and wreckage from destroyed ships. They had analyzed the signals that linked the enemy vessels together. And finally, they had found a weakness. Lieutenant Commander Jennifer Hayes had led the team that infiltrated the Dominion command ship. She was 35 years old, an expert in electronic warfare who had volunteered for what everyone knew was probably a suicide mission. Her small ship had slipped through the battle chaos, using stealth technology that had been improved over 10 years of war. Her team had uploaded a virus into the Dominion network, spreading it to every ship in the fleet. Now the enemy was blind. Their greatest strength, the ability to coordinate thousands of ships as if they were one organism, had become their weakness. Each vessel was fighting alone, unable to communicate with the others, unable to receive commands from their central intelligence. Drake gave the order to attack. All fleet elements were to execute the final phase. Across the solar system, human ships surged forward. They were joined by warriors who had waited 10 years to avenge their created illusions that confused Dominion sensors. Crystal ships, rebuilt with human weapons, struck at the enemy flanks. This was no longer a human war. It was a war for all the species that had suffered under the Dominion's conquest. Captain Maria Santos commanded the Defiant, the same ship she had led in the first battle 10 years ago. It had been repaired and upgraded many times since then, but she refused to transfer to a newer vessel. This ship had been with her through everything. It would be with her at the end. She led her squadron into the heart of the Dominion fleet, targeting the largest enemy vessels. Her crew moved with the experience of veterans who had fought 100 engagements. They knew exactly what to do, exactly when to do it, and exactly how to survive against an enemy that had once seemed invincible. Commander Taylor, now 40 years old and commanding his own battleship, struck at the Dominion's left flank. His tactics had become famous throughout the fleet for their creativity and unpredictability. The Dominion had learned to fear ships under his command, never knowing what impossible maneuver he would try next. The battle raged for 12 hours. It was the largest space battle in history, with thousands of ships filling the darkness with weapons, fire, and explosions. The Dominion fought with all the ferocity that had destroyed the Coalition. But they were fighting blind, each ship isolated from the others, unable to coordinate their attacks. Slowly, inevitably, they began to lose. Human losses were terrible. 200 ships were destroyed. Over 50,000 people died in the cold void of space. But for every human ship that fell, 20 Dominion vessels were destroyed. The Black Fleet that had seemed endless was shrinking, breaking apart, dying. As the battle entered its final hours, the surviving Dominion ships tried to retreat. Fewer than 300 remained of the original 12,000. They turned away from Earth and ran toward the outer edges of the solar system, heading for the darkness between stars. Drake ordered his fleet to let them go. They were broken. They would never threaten the galaxy again. Oran stood beside the Admiral as the last Dominion ships disappeared. The former Coalition Admiral looked different now, his crystalline skin marked with the scars of battles he had fought alongside his human allies. He had never expected to see this day. He had never believed it was possible. He asked Drake how humans had done it. The Coalition had tried for 12,000 years to build a civilization that could withstand any threat. They had failed. Humans had done it in 10 years. Drake was quiet for a moment. He thought about all the people who had died in this war. He thought about the sacrifices, the losses, the endless nights of planning and preparing. He thought about the stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had carried humanity through impossible odds. He said that humans were not better than the Coalition species. They were just different. Where the Coalition had built walls, humans had built weapons. Where the Coalition had sought peace, humans had prepared for war. It was not something to be proud of. It was simply who they were. But then Drake said something else. He said that maybe now things could change. The threat was gone. The universe was safe. Perhaps humans could learn from the Coalition survivors, learn to build instead of destroy, learn to explore instead of conquer. He looked at Oran and smiled. He said that the Coalition had 12,000 years of civilization to teach them, and they had all the time in the universe to learn. Outside the observation window, the stars burned bright and eternal. The Dominion was defeated. The Coalition would be rebuilt, different this time, stronger with humanity at its heart. The galaxy had been saved by a species that had only left there a century before. a species that had spent most of their existence fighting among themselves, a species that, when faced with impossible odds and certain destruction, had simply refused to accept either one. The aliens had called them primitive. They had called them children. They had said that humans could not possibly stand against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations lasting. They had been wrong. And now, as the fires of battle faded and peace returned to the stars, humanity looked out at a universe full of possibilities. They had proven what they could do when united by fear and necessity. Now they would discover what they could do when united by hope. The long war was over. The future was just beginning.